I still feel embarrassed about saying this. If this isn't the trajectory of my life, like, I don't know what is. So my first memory was her dying. She fell from my mum and dad's windowsill. My dad lost his job. My nan died. And my nan had a stroke. Now, this is a bit sad, but I don't feel like I'm fun to be around. We all had Echo Falls. Do you remember Echo Falls? But I do constantly think that every single person on this world, if they like me, they don't actually like me. They're pretending. Like, I find myself even questioning my best friend. So low. I was so anxious. I didn't want to leave the house. Walking the dog was like a good day. What helps my anxiety? Don't get too comfortable. Clearly I've still withheld, like, I need to bring this up in therapy. Blimey. I'm not sure if, okay, this plant is really annoying me, but wait one second. It's like a massive tree, but I know that every time I moved it will like rustle and I'm not gonna like sit still. And I realised that the whole of the last episode I was using my laptop mic, not this mic. So when I went to edit the last episode, I was like, this audio is terrible, and I thought it was because it's a cheap mic. I'm just new to this and also stupid, so hopefully we're getting better audio today. So we're off to a great start. Welcome back to a conversation with me, Erin, and this is our safe space to have a bit of a chat. Before we get into the conversation today, I just want to say thank you so much for all the support. Like, genuinely, I never ever in my life could have anticipated how much love and support I was going to get. It was absolutely unbelievable, and I feel so grateful. Yeah, it's been incredible, and I just really wasn't expecting the amount of love. Like, I genuinely thought it was going to get a couple of views, and the reels are being well received, the Instagram's being well received, the TikTok's being well received. It's just incredible. And since last week I've made a TikTok page and an Instagram page, especially for the podcast, and I'm uploading clips on there. On the Instagram I'm also uploading extra little bits. So yeah, I'm just, honestly, it's been absolutely incredible. I've been putting so much time into it, and I feel like it's really, like, you can tell, like, I feel like you guys, oh my god, my dog has just farted. I'll be that really, I'm sorry, I really tried to ignore it, but I was almost like eating it. He normally only does really loud farts and they don't smell, but more recently he's been in like really silent, smelly ones, and they are just horrific. Like, I can't tell you. What was I saying? Yeah, the podcast this week and how people are receiving it and how much love I've been getting and wanting to make the best content possible has completely consumed my mind, but in the best possible way. I think this is the first time in a really long time I felt so passionate and excited about something, and I really feel like this is going somewhere. I just can't tell you. I haven't really been up to much this week. I was going to do a little, like, I sat down planning the podcast and I was like, right, well, sit down, write what you been doing last week, and I realised how boring my life is because I cannot tell you one exciting thing. However, tomorrow's something we'll use the term exciting, positive mental attitude in that. Something's happening that I will definitely share my experience of. So you might know, you might not know, I've got Crohn's disease. This will probably come up every single episode. Like, people are going to be like, hun, we know you're ill, shut up. But I'm having to start a new medication, and it's an injection. It's a self-administering injection called adalimumab. I can't pronounce it for the life of me. But tomorrow I've got to have a loading dose, so that means I've got to have 4 injections instead of just the 1. But a nurse is coming to the house and showing me how to do it and stuff. So we've had a sharps been delivered. We've had the injections delivered. They're currently sat in the fridge. You know, you're just like, what is my life? And the sharps bin ruins the vibe of the kitchen. My kitchen's very, like, there's a lot of dark wood. There's green. There's, like, mosaic tiles. There's all the walls are red apart from one green wall and the mosaic tiles. There's like a wall bar, but it's all like wood, and there's lots of plants. Like, that's the vibe, yeah. And then all of a sudden we've got a grey and yellow sharps bin. Doesn't really fit, but I ain't got a choice. So that is what's happening tomorrow. I will definitely, there's something to look forward to, something to keep your eyes peeled for, because I'll obviously talk about it. I think it's really important, on a more serious note, to raise some awareness for this stuff. So yeah, that's exciting. At least I'll have like some more juicy goss to tell you next week. Before I get on to today's topic, I just want to put a little bit of disclaimer. I'm not in no means a medical professional or a mental health professional. So my course refuses to give us accreditation. That's why, because apparently I can't even talk. So I'm not a qualified mental health professional. If you are really struggling, speak to a doctor. In the channel description there'll be mental health charities, reach out to them. I've been supported by a mental health charity in the past and it's been incredible. I've also been to the doctors about my mental health. So yeah, or speak to a friend, family member. Speak to anyone. This isn't professional advice. This is just sharing a little bit of, just sprinkling a little bit of what I've experienced. And if you relate, that's incredible, because that's what the purpose of this is for. So today's topic is living with an anxiety disorder. Now, I've had countless mental health professionals tell me I have anxiety, and I've generalised anxiety as well, but I don't have like a diagnosis, I don't think. I think if you looked at my health records, it wouldn't say like anxiety disorder, but I've been told that that's what I have. And also I think if you lived with me, you'd like, woof, anyone that knows me is like, she's an anxious queen. Yeah, we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to be going into a bit of my childhood, digging up some trauma, that stuff that I love to talk about. Going to be talking a little bit about how it impacts my life, some of the symptoms I experience. We've got a lot to unpack today, but I think it's going to be a really good episode. I hope you can take something from it. So when I was a child, that would have been what? I was born in 2002, so 2003, 2004 to 2011, 2012, maybe even older than that. It depends what you classify as a child. But during that time period, only 8% of children in the whole of the UK had a diagnosed anxiety disorder, and that's in 2007. That still shocked me as actually how high that was. But if you look at 7 to 16 year olds in I'm just looking at my notes, 7 to 16 year olds in 2022, 18% of them have got probable mental illness. Now that jump is absolutely staggering, and I just wanted to preface it before I explain what was happening in my childhood, because I think it was a different time. Even though I'm only 21, it was a different time, but also kids nowadays go through so much more. What my anxiety stems from, things that were completely out of control, like of anything. They've got nothing to do with the world, but obviously now the world is ridiculously scary and children are on social media and stuff like that. But I think I just found that really fascinating, because I think there's a lot of focus on adults with mental illness, but I think it seems to me that children are being left behind, and that's, I think, what happened to me. So I guess we should probably start around the age of 8, even though I showed signs of anxiety before this time, because I had an extreme phobia of dressed up people, to the point of I would have panic attacks. This was from the age of like 2 until 10, 11, and I don't like them now, but I'm not scared of them in the same way. I had hypnotherapy that didn't work. Like, it was extreme, to the point of I knew that they were there before they were there, if that makes sense, because I was so hyper aware, so conscious. My parents are going on holiday this week, so I just got interrupted by a delivery. I've had so many deliveries today of them getting clothes and stuff. They're going away for 4 days. but the both of them are worse than me. What was I saying? Oh yeah, just like people. So I'd be like hyper aware. I'd have panic attacks. It was horrific. Like, because we couldn't afford to go abroad when I was a kid, so we did sun holidays. So if you don't know what a sun holiday is, you'd get a voucher in the Sun newspaper, and it'd be a really, really cheap holiday. I don't know how cheap, and you'd stay in like a caravan at like a Haven holiday park or something like that. I think sometimes it weren't even Haven, it was like, I don't know. But anyway, that was my childhood, going on those holidays. And obviously when you go on caravan holidays in the UK, they have dressed up people. Again, I got interrupted by my dad. Honestly, you don't get a second's peace in this house. Yeah, so there'd always be like these characters at these holiday parks. As much as I loved the caravan holidays, literally the minute I was there, I would go white as a sheet. I'd be like, where are they? When are they going to be here? Like, it was just so traumatic for everyone involved, because every time I wasn't in the caravan or outside of the caravan park, I would be on high alert. So that was when I was really, really little. And then at the age of 8, a lot happened in my life. There was a lot of change, a lot of trauma, like big life changes. My dad lost his job, my nan died, and my nan had a stroke, all in the same year. And both my nans, they weren't just nuns to me, they were like second mums. So my grandparents were like extra sets of parents. Not that my parents weren't able to look after me, because they were, but they worked full time. So from the age of 0, particularly the nan that passed away, from the age, I think, of 6 months, my mum went back to work. Or it might have been before that, it might have been 4 months. She went to work very, very early. No, it wasn't as early as 4 months, was it? Don't be dramatic. I think it was 6 months. I went to my nan and granddad's and was there every day. So they were a huge, huge part of my life. Would see them every day. And really, really suddenly, she had a heart attack in her sleep, died. So, and I say it so matter-of-factly, but it was. So a lot had changed in that year. And I think that's where there was a shift in just the anxiety from the phobia to anxiety about every single little thing that happens in life. I would always think of the worst very, very extremely, I think, from that age. That's what I can remember. Obviously, I was so little, so it's hard to remember before that anyway. But for me, I struggled to remember before the age of 8, and I think it's because something inside me shifted. So I think there was always a predisposition for me to be an anxious person, but I think I think it got triggered then, potentially, but obviously we don't know. I was always the crybaby at school. I was always called a crybaby from my peers, even my friends, because kids are horrible. Like, kids are just horrible little creatures. I love children, but also they're so vile to each other. So I was called a crybaby, and to be fair, I was very, very sensitive, and the teachers made it apparent that they found me overly sensitive. I was told by teachers, you're too sensitive, or stop crying, or you need to grow up. Like, that was almost a narrative that was told to me through school, because I would get very, very overstimulated and over emotional in situations which probably to another child they may have found that they could cope with. So, like, for example, I remember at PGL I cried pretty much all day every day, just because I didn't have the confidence in myself to do the activities. And to be fair, the teacher that I was put with, and I think looking back now, I was probably deliberately put with her because she was really, really good with me. She wasn't even a teacher, she was a receptionist, but anyway, she was there to like comfort me and cuddle me and make sure I was okay. But another child would find that absolutely fine, like most kids did. Like, I was the odd one out, if that makes sense. And this happened even in school as well. If there was a situation I found uncomfortable, I'd be in class and somebody would... I still feel embarrassed about saying this, and I know it is so silly. When I was 2, we adopted Smudge and Smurf, because our other cat died. And Smurf, when I was 3, so this is like my first memory. If this isn't the trajectory of my life, like, I don't know what is. So my first memory was her dying. She was a kitten when we got her, and she fell from my mum and dad's windowsill and hit her head on a wheelie bin, bounced off and died. And we didn't see this happen because my mum was out and my dad was at work, so I was staying at my nan and granddad's. But then my dad got home and she was like underneath the windowsill dead. So, and that's like my first memories finding out that. And apparently the first thing I said was like, she was my best friend, like burst into tears. Absolutely heartbreaking. So if you're a kid and you hear that a cat's fallen out of a window, didn't land at his feet and died, that is so hilarious. And because I allowed myself to be a bit of a target, people would just like retell this story to me and like die laughing. And then I'd get really upset and like run to the corner of the classroom and like just cry my eyes out, and like, everyone would be like, oh, here she goes again. Things like that would happen. Like, and clearly, oh my God, clearly I've still withheld, like, I need to bring this up in therapy. Blimey. I went through all of primary school being very much picked on, and I went to a very small primary school, so we were all still friends. It was really weird, which is why I think I've got such like a weird relationship with friends. But now, we're not talking about friends in this episode. But it would even be little things like, I remember once like a computer deleted all my work. So instead of just pressing the undo button, I sat there and cried instead of like problem solving and dealing with it myself. And this would be like in year 5. And I remember being made to feel very, very difficult by one of the teachers. And she was like, oh, I can't deal with you. And stormed off. And like another teacher come and help me and was like, calm down the situation. And then within an instance, when it was sorted, I'd be fine. But I just felt so overwhelmed, like I couldn't do it myself. I didn't have the confidence in myself to do it. And I'd second guess myself. And I even found that I dropped out of drama school because, and I was doing really, really well. I was getting like, I remember I got a lead part. This is when I was probably like 9, maybe even younger than that, maybe 8. But I was so scared to play this lead role that I dropped out because my anxiety was so bad. But obviously you can't verbalise that when you're a child. You don't have, back then as well, I don't know about now with kids now, but I didn't know the vocabulary to verbalise how I was feeling other than just crying and trying to either flee the situation or just freeze. Now I think when I spoke to my therapist, she's gone, that should have been picked up. The excessive crying in school, you shouldn't have been seen as, oh, she just cries a lot, or she's too sensitive, or she needs to grow up, or she's babied. Because actually I was never ever mollycoddled or babied by my parents. Like when I was home I was fine, it was just in school. That maybe should have been brought to my parents as like, but then my school was a failure anyway. We had something like 17 teachers between the year 2 and year 6, so school was an absolute joke. But there was no one coming to my parents being like, look, this isn't right, like there's something there. So it's kind of like, I just thought that's how I was. So then by the time secondary school come, I almost like shut off emotionally, kind of. But then again, I didn't. It was weird. Like I didn't cry for years, but I was also ridiculously emotional still. Honestly, you could not write this. I just had to pause because I was having like major anxiety because the dog was barking. I couldn't get him to stop. Oh, you're okay. Yeah, and I was just, and there's been men, the kids have gone out. I think we got up to like secondary school. That was a really weird time for me because it's probably when I felt less anxious, but also I still didn't have an easy ride with like friendships and stuff like that. And also I really, really desperately tried to change so I wasn't being at all, I wouldn't cry about barely anything, especially in front of people. Like it's almost like something switched in me from year 6 to year 7 where it's like, right, you're not going to cry anymore. But I was still an extremely anxious person. Like, I think most teenagers, I refused to put my hand up, or like, not refused, but I really wouldn't volunteer or put my hand up. And if I did, I'd be extremely cautious. I'd overthink it. I would have to be 100%. Like, I just didn't like really speaking in front of people. I didn't put myself out there anymore. I stopped being outgoing. I become conscious of literally everything. I had like crippling self-doubt, which I still do. Even just walking, I would question the way I spoke. It'd be like I'd come home at night, and this is still the case now, and I would lay in bed, like, just my mind would overplay every single thing I'd done that day, like overthinking, stressing. And there was also a side to me that I was so ridiculously scared of upsetting my parents or disappointing my parents. I only got one detention, and that was just because I slept in my whole secondary school years. I was just terrified of disappointing them. I did everything in my power to try not to disappoint them, which again fueled this like anxiety, self-doubt, perfectionist inside of me. I even then become conscious around family and friends. Like, I feel like I never really allowed myself to just let go. Like, if you asked me to, I wouldn't have known how. Even like, so it's like most teenagers, so like my parents were very liberal, and they were very much of the opinion of, as long as you tell us and you're in somebody's house and you're safe and we know the parents, we're okay with you doing pretty much everything, as long as there's transparency. The minute there's transparency, then they'll be like, you're not doing that. So they'd rather me tell them than provide the alcohol and me be in a house, whether that was ours or someone else's, and drink, over being in a field, obviously, because they're like, you're going to do it anyway. So the first time I ever drunk, it was New Year's Eve, and we all had Echo Falls. Do you remember Echo Falls? Even the thought of that now turns my stomach. But I was terrified. Like, I think most kids would be really excited to have alcohol and to have the opportunity, but in my head I was like, well, I can't be drunk because my parents. Even though my parents knew, they provided the alcohol allegedly. They knew where I was, they knew the parents, they knew the house, they knew who I was with. It was just girls. That I was still inside me absolutely terrified that I would disappoint them by drinking, even though they knew that I was there drinking. And that was kind of, I guess that's the first time I realised that probably my teenage years wouldn't necessarily be the same as other people's. And maybe everybody has those anxieties and just don't talk about it. Maybe that's really normal. Maybe some people just kind of are very carefree and don't really think through the consequences. But for me, I'm always thinking about the worst case. Disappointing parents, getting too drunk, being sick. I'm a emetophobe. Needing my stomach pumped, ending up in hospital, dying. Like, those, when in that situation with the alcohol, that's what was going through my head. It wasn't just, and of course I was tipsy and I had fun with my friends, but the minute I started to feel a bit drunk, I'd drink water, because I was like, no, you can't feel out of control, Erin. You've got to be in control. You've got to control everything. This is what was going on in my head. I guess another kind of instance that I can share to kind of give you kind of more of an example of how when I was a teenager my life was impacted. So I started talking to this boy. I'm trying not to give too much away, because even though it was when I was like 15, I don't want people, if people in my school know, that's fine. If you're listening to this, hi. But also I don't want to make it obvious. But anyway, so I was talking to this boy. We were talking for quite a long time. And we both like said we liked each other, and I was really excited about him. And obviously he was like, well, let's like meet. Obviously I was 15, so, and the last thing in my head was doing anything. I just want to put that out there. That's not what we were going to meet. We were going to meet in a park and just hang out. Anyway, classy. Gonna meet in the park. The thought of meeting him was so terrifying to me that I just kept putting it off, kept making excuses. In my head, that would be literally the worst thing in the world. I couldn't push myself out my comfort zone to go and meet this person I really, really liked, and I don't know why. There was a million and one things going in my head, and it's not like it was somebody from the internet or a stranger. Like, it was a boy. We went to school together. I knew who he was. He knew who I was. So it wouldn't have been weird, but in my head it was instantly weird. And I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. And then you go, and then in my head, you can tell what I'm talking about. I'm getting words up, and then in my head I go, well, then I can't tell my parents, but then I can't lie to my parents. Then what if I tell my parents? Then what if they don't let me? But then what if they think it's something? And what if he ends up breaking up with me? Hun, you don't even want to meet him, so let alone him being your boyfriend. But all these things, and it's like, well, what if he tries to kiss me and I don't want to kiss him? Just tell him you don't want to. But all these things are going on in my head, and then the whole situation seems so awful and like it will be the worst thing in the world, that I just kept blowing him off, to the point of he then spoke to another girl while he was talking to me and went behind my back, met up with her, and then just ghosted me. But obviously, if I'm not willing to meet up with him, then nothing can come of the liking. Yeah, it was literally every single thing was just, is it catastrophized? Is that the right word? It would just be catastrophized in my head. And there was a time period after, now trigger warning, I'm going to briefly discuss terror attacks, so I'll put a time code on screen now of when I stopped talking about it, because it's only going to be for a small portion. After the Friday the 13th, and I remember it so clearly, Friday the 13th Paris terror attack, I remember Children in Need was on. We had PE, but we were in non-uniform at school. I think I was in year 8. I come home, watch Children in Need, and then after Children in Need, breaking news flashed on, and there was the Paris terror attacks. And then I think it was after that, for a short period, there was quite frequent attacks. I was somebody, like, me and my mum were going to London so much. I didn't go out. I would only go out to places I knew, places I felt comfortable. I didn't go to London for years, and every time I did go to London, I was having almost a constant anxiety attack. It was horrific. I just thought that was going to happen to me, and that, I think, again, was another situation. I wasn't in the attacks, and I've never, fortunately, touch wood, been in a situation like that. However, it was just like that existential, oh my god, this could happen to anyone, this is going to happen to me, I need to do everything in my power to protect myself, to the point of, even in my hometown, like, I thought like something was going to happen. Like, it was a really difficult time. I was having nightmares, night terrors, but that was just from something I saw on the news. And it's that thing of that also then heightened my anxiety even more and limited what I did even more, because I was just terrified of everything. I thought worst case of everything. So I just wanted to share that, because I think that added to my anxiety, but that was obviously long before the drinking and the boy. And more of those sort of situations happened where I would try and be as in control as I could of every single situation throughout school, parties, surrounding boys, friends. I overanalyzed everything, overthought about everything, tried to control everything, and really, like, I look back on my teen years and I really limited myself. I could have had some amazing times, been a little bit wild, and my parents would have been fine about it, because they were so, like, as long as I was honest with them and I was safe, they were so okay with everything. But yeah, so it really restricted me. And then it got to about the sixth form, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's in year 12, so that kind of took up a lot of year 12. But then in year 13, I think I missed a month of school. I couldn't leave my bed. I was so low. I was so anxious. I didn't want to leave the house. Walking the dog was like a good day. Like, if I managed to get out with Albie, that was a good day. Like, I was an absolute mess. When COVID happened, I wasn't allowed to leave the house because I was high risk. And even though that added its own really extreme anxieties, it also meant I felt weirdly protected. No one was going to force me to leave. My parents wouldn't have to put pressure on me. Not pressure, but there would be no encouragement to leave. So it was just me in my house with my mum and dad, and I didn't have any schoolwork to do. I could make YouTube videos, I could distract myself, and I was in this safe little bubble, and it was just me and my 2 people and my dog, and that was enough. I think that was one of the worst things to have happened to me, just because it meant that it could fuel that, well, if you do go out into the world, bad things are going to happen, so you might as well stay at home because that's where you're safe, and don't push yourself out your comfort zone because the worst will happen. That fueled that voice, so I could just be Erin indoors, and Erin indoors is really happy, and even though she definitely would be happier if she pushed herself out of her comfort zone and experienced the world, actually she doesn't know any different, and this protects her from any immediate anxiety. So unreal. I think the first year of uni, it stopped for the first half, but then the second half we had lockdown, the winter lockdown, so that wasn't a good time for my mental health. I'm sure we'll talk about that at another point, but that's when I kind of began experiencing like ED behaviours, and I think a lot of that come from my need to control and my need to feel in control. That's where my anxiety stems from. And I think going back to the age of 8, lots of things happened in that year that was completely out of control. I couldn't control my nan having a stroke and losing her speech. I couldn't control my other nan dying suddenly, and I couldn't control my dad losing his job. And it was and I don't want to go into that because that's not my business, but it was a really difficult time for the family. I couldn't control any of that, so my little brain is like, well, that means like just felt, I guess I must have felt unsafe, I don't know, but now I've got this obsession with controlling because that means I can make sure everything's okay. Whoa, that's a bit deep. What a poignant thought. And then in second year, I think because of the ED, because that heightens anxiety as well, and because I wasn't really happy at uni, I was then leaving lectures because I was having a panic attack. I just didn't feel safe anywhere. I did not, apart from the house that I'm in right now, but obviously that's like 2 odd hours away from York, I did not feel safe anywhere. So I was in a constant state of anxiety. I was in fight or flight mode constantly. Like, I've never experienced anxiety like it. Like, I would be happy 1 second trying on clothes in Urban Outfitters, and all of a sudden break down, have a panic attack on the phone to my mum. I remember once we went to Cambridge for a day, having a really nice day, me and mum, and we were absolutely fine, and then I went into Urban because I needed some jeans, and I was in the changing rooms probably an hour, just couldn't find jeans to fit. This is, I think, when my most drastic body changes happened from my ED. I'm trying to not say any triggering words, and I just had I still don't really have a concept of what I look like. So I just their clothes were too big, they weren't fitting my new body right, it was just hell. And I literally left and just broke. I had a panic attack in the middle of Cambridge, and we had to go home. But I was absolutely fine up until, it was so extreme, and there would be no reason for it. And I think that's when it was at its worst. I think I can manage my anxiety a lot better now. I still have a lot of behaviours which I'll talk to you about, but I'm not having anxiety attacks and panic attacks as much. What I differentiate it to by, because obviously everyone calls them different things. For me personally, when I'm talking, I just want to clarify. Panic attacks for me are when I'm rapidly breathing, I'm sobbing, I can't get control of my emotions, and I need someone to physically like breathe with me, hold me, comfort me. My anxiety attacks, they'll last, it could be days, it could be hours, but it's where I feel in a constant state of anxiety, and I'm having, my heart's going, I feel like it affects my mind a lot more, like I'm on constant high alert, I think that something bad's gonna happen, and sometimes that can lead in a panic attack, sometimes it doesn't. I guess following on from that, I will speak to you about the symptoms. So I'm getting a lot less panic attacks now, which I'm so grateful for, but that's taken over a year of therapy and work. And when I first went into therapy, we did like a scale thing, and my therapist is very much like, we don't need a diagnosis, or it's not to diagnose, but it's just to give us both a guide of how I'm doing. And I was at the highest one, like pretty much the highest number of anxiety, like extreme anxiety, and now I'm low to moderate, so I lean more towards moderate, but on good days I'm normally moderate anxiety. So that's a really big improvement, but it's taken a lot of work. And I want to preface that my therapy is private, and I know not everybody is fortunate enough to be in that position, so I just want to know, like, I know I'm extremely grateful, and I know that some people can be in as desperate position as me and my family were in for my mental health, but still not be able to give that support. So I guess the symptoms, I found this really hard. When I sat down to write out the symptoms, I found it really hard to pinpoint. I think because a lot of the symptoms I experience are so normal to me now that I wouldn't even think that they're an anxiety symptom. They're just a part of who I am. And I know that can be quite dangerous to identify yourself as a mental illness, but because I am separate, but I think a lot of my personality is because I'm an anxious person. A lot of my behaviours is because I'm an anxious person, because it's a way my body has learnt to cope. And I know that isn't always a good thing, but it's 21 years of being in constant anxiety. Like, that's kind of who I am. And I know that sounds a bit sad, but it's also kind of true. I'm constantly self-doubting. I don't think I ever fully believe in myself. I'll have moments, but there's more self-doubt than there is self-belief. I genuinely walk into a room and think every single one of those people is watching me and silently criticising me. I don't think, even my family, like, if I hear my parents talking, I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I think they're talking about me, even though they love me and they always want the best for me. But I do constantly think that every single person on this world, if they like me, they don't actually like me. They're pretending. Like, I find myself even questioning my best friend. Her and like my parents are like the three people in the world that I know like do genuinely like me, and I have those thoughts less. But I do sometimes question, like, is she just friends with me because I was an easy option? That happens all the time. Like, I genuinely don't think that anybody else likes me for me. Maybe that's not an anxiety thing, but I would branch it under my anxiety because I'm hyper aware 24/7. Like, I cannot tell you, I'm constantly on high alert, constantly aware of things, hearing things like planes. After everything that happened that's happening in Ukraine, that was when my anxiety was at its worst, and it was really distressing me. I think linking back to the terror, it's kind of like, that's so catastrophic. I couldn't sleep. I was on BBC News hours a day. I was reading about it. It completely consumed me. But even now, if I hear a plane, I'm like, oh, what's that? Or if my dad's phone alert goes for the news, we were talking about it yesterday actually, and he's like, I know the minute the news alert goes on my phone that you're gonna be like, what's that, and I'll have to explain it to you, because I'm so hyper aware and vigilant of everything, and to the point of it so consuming for my mind. Like, I can't just go on a leisurely walk because I'll be constantly like Like, I just can't relax, even when I'm in the house. It's almost made me think that I'm psychic, and I think I'm psychic anyway, but I know what's going to happen before it happens, like 100% of the time, because my mind has allowed me to analyse everything so intricately my whole life that I can predict things that are going to happen. That it's just such an extreme hyper awareness, sounds, smells, everything. Like, I'm just so aware of everything, and it's like, obviously sometimes it can be a good thing, but also a lot of the times it's not a great thing. And like, what people are saying, I pick up on it. Like, yeah, it's wild. I can be stood there not with my headphones in, but I'll know if the people behind me are talking about like something bad, or if there's been an incident, like I'll pick up on it. Like, I'll know. I cannot make a decision for the life of me. This does my head in, but I just can't. I think whatever decision I make, I'm going to get judged upon. There isn't a right decision, but then there's not a wrong decision, but then there should be a right decision. My head is like go, go, go 1,000,001 miles an hour all the time. Like, yeah, I just cannot make a decision, because no matter what decision makes, I'll overthink it so intensely. Like, you should have seen me and Kira trying to pick a place for a holiday. I was overthinking so much, but I'm like, yeah, in my head I'm like, yeah, but if I go there, that'll mean that, but then if I go there, I mean that, but then what if I go there, but then what if I'm supposed to be going there? Like, honestly, like, it's so draining. When my anxiety's bad, or I know if my anxiety's about to flare, because I'll feel like I'm going to be sick. I'll get like this lump and I can't swallow, and in my head I'm thinking I'm going to be sick, even though I'm not, but it's because I've got emetophobia, and then I'll start panicking about being sick, and then that'll cause a panic attack. Like I've mentioned loads, I have a need to control everything, and if it's something that I can't control, I'll find it really, really uncomfortable and difficult. So like, going on a plane, that's going to be a challenge for me. Like, just going with the flow as well, like just having a day of like, oh, let's see what happens. Well, I can't be in control of that, so then I'll start to freak out. But in my head, I'd love to be a person that's spontaneous and can just go with the flow and let someone else take the reins, and that's what I want. But also, I think I naturally, if that happens, I'm naturally then like, well, no, I need to take, like, I naturally kind of swoop in or try and guide it in some way. I can dissociate, and then just when I'm having an anxiety attack, there can be a whole day where I feel like I'm not in my body, I'm not in my skin, I'm not in my mind, I don't really know what's going on. Yeah, I just feel very, very disconnected from reality. I'm pretty much always tense. Like, I always feel like that. Like, if you feel my shoulders, they'll be like that. Like, I'm just so like, I'm just a tense person. I'm a bit like, I don't know. But then I'm also like, it depends how well if you know me really well, I'm then really relaxed and like a bit mental and just a bit weird. But for the most part, I'm quite like a tense person. Like, it takes me a lot to feel relaxed. Like, after a good few hours, I'll relax, but it takes me a while. Catastrophizing, thinking of the worst case scenario at literally every decision. Like, I'll be cutting food and I'll be like, oh my god, what if this knife goes into my stomach and I die? Like, what? Like, literally every single thing I do, I think of like the worst case scenario while I'm doing it, which like spikes my anxiety. Obviously, sometimes it's a little bit more extreme than other times, like refusing to go to London for 2 years because you think you're going to be attacked, or refusing to leave the house because you think there's going to be like a war breakout on a random Tuesday. Like, genuinely, like, it can be quite extreme, but it can also be like little things, like I'll be walking the dog and I'm like, what if Albie just runs away and I never see him again, and then like I get killed? Like, it's genuinely like the most random weird things. Like, they make no logical sense, but that's where my head goes. I need constant reassurance. Like, my dad was talking to me about this as well yesterday. He was like, when him and my mum can tell when I'm anxious or I'm getting anxious about something, because I'll ask 1,000,001 questions, but the answer to the question won't be enough. So we're like, well, what about this? What about this? Yeah, but why? But then what about this? Like, I'm like, like 2-year-olds when they can speak, or like maybe 3, they ask a question about a question about a question. That's me when I'm anxious, because I need to know the ins and outs of every little detail. But even then it's not enough, because it's not coming from a logical place of questioning. I need to know every detail. I need constant reassurance. I always think that people hate me or that I've upset people. Like, I can become quite obsessive with questioning and knowing that I'm okay, or that they're okay, or that I've not done something wrong. Like I said, I hyperfixate, I overanalyze. So I'm like, my panic attacks are almost like, I'll feel a little bit anxious, I'll go really, really quiet, and then I can feel it building slowly in here, and then I can feel myself like on the verge of crying. And that's what, if it feels like I'm on the verge of crying and I can't talk because of the lump in my throat, I then feel like I can't breathe, and then I'm just like grounding myself, because talking about it can bring them on. Either somebody says something, like it might not even be like, it might be like, can I get past please, and I'll break. Or it can be just me on my own, and then I'll like cry my eyes out. I'll be like like obviously the typical, like, I can't then breathe. So I'm like sobbing, I'm struggling to breathe, and like I just need somebody to sit with me, breathe with me, calm me down. Albie's really good actually. Like, Albie knows when I'm gonna have one, and he'll like sit by me and like comfort me as if somebody's not there. Oh my god, why is that making me emotional? He's really good. Like, he'll like, because I'll normally be on the edge of a seat like with my head down to try and get some air in, and he comes and he licks away my tears, and he like sits, not like, because he's quite an intense dog, so like if he wants attention he'll be like in your face, but he's not like that. Like, he'll let me lead him, but like he knows what he's doing. He's such a good boy. But yeah, so those are my panic attacks. Like, my anxiety attacks are like, I'm in a constant fight or flight. I feel completely dissociated from my body. Nothing feels real. I can smell everything. I can hear everything. I can see everything. It's almost like I can't quite explain it, but that's kind of the best way. Like, I can hear everything but also not hear anything, and I can see everything but also not see anything, and I can smell everything but also like everything so much. I'm so aware of everything, it's almost like a blur. I don't know, it's quite overwhelming, so it's hard to explain. So I guess, how does it impact my life? I guess you've probably got a sense of how it impacts my life from what I've said. I am constantly on edge. Like, even when I'm relaxed, I'm not relaxed. Like, I'm constantly thinking. The only time I'm fully relaxed is if I'm meditating like every single day regularly. I never ever feel like I'm good enough. I never feel really worthy. I always feel like I've done something wrong, like I said earlier. I never feel good enough. It does feel slightly impossible to be spontaneous and live in the moment. Like, I don't really know what spontaneity and living in the moment could look like for me. I'd love it, but I'd love my life to be like that, but I just can't imagine that for me. Like, I can't see how I could implement that in my life. I can waste hours overthinking, like, one thing could happen to me and I'll spend days overanalyzing it, maybe even weeks. Like, it could be the smallest thing that nobody else has picked up on, but in my head I'll like grip onto it and be like, oh my god, that makes me the worst human being in the world. Like, you're evil, when I've like accidentally stolen an ant. Like, do you know what I mean? It makes me wish I could be more fun. Now, this is a bit sad, but I don't feel like I'm fun to be around. I feel like I'm a pain in the arse to be around. So I don't think that I'm fun. And for me, fun would be like life inside of the party, a bit crazy, a bit wild. Yeah. Even though I can be the life and soul of the party, it takes me a lot to get there. And it's very dependent on a lot of things. I'm not just there instantaneously. So I just don't think I'm fun. I might be, but in my head I'm not a fun person. So I want to quickly talk about what helps my anxiety. I've never taken meds, so I don't want to go into that because I don't have experience to share. But for me, Rescue Remedy, unbelievable. I literally took some in one of the breaks of this, really, really helps me. You can get it from Superdrug and stuff like that, and it comes in so many different types. I always have a funny podcast downloaded, something that completely distracts me on Spotify. So if I'm out and I start to feel anxious, I can just put my headphones in. Make sure you've always got headphones on you. I love Parenting Hell, Jack Mate's Happy Hour, Wednesdays We Drink Wine, Nearly Weds. They're like some of my go-tos if I'm feeling really anxious, to just like switch off and just like try and distract myself as best as I can. Journal. So if I feel like I'm about to spiral, I write and don't try not to think about what I'm writing, because sometimes you find that gives you the reason as to why you're so anxious, so then actually you can rationalize it in your head and talk it through with yourself. So that kind of helps me calm the like million and one thoughts that are going in my mind. Walking, again, with a funny podcast, just to have a breather. Like, I feel like fresh air is just the best when you're anxious. If planning is what helps you to calm down, plan your little heart out. Like, plan as much as you can, because if that means that you can live your life, great, who's stopping you? Don't get too comfortable. I think that was my failure during COVID. Obviously, I couldn't help it, but settling into your comfort zone means that you're going to become even more anxious doing anything outside of that, and it's going to seem even more impossible and even more difficult, and then you get stuck in a rut, and then you become even more anxious, if that makes sense. I'm doing it now in my life. I'm trying to step out my comfort zone because I become too comfortable, and it got to a point where I was struggling to even leave the house because my comfort zone becomes so small. And finally, have a conversation with someone that's really rational. I'm very fortunate. My dad's a very rational person. My mum's very rational. And also my best friend is ridiculously rational. Like, she's the complete balance of me. So I find speaking through my challenges as someone who is very, very rational helps so much, because but only if I'm in the right headspace. I've learned the headspace I need to be in for that, but it does actually ground me and think, okay, no, that's doable. Some people would say meditate. I find that doesn't work for me, because if I'm in an anxious headspace, laying there trying to focus on my breathing is just going to make me have a panic attack, but it might work for you. So that's kind of it, really. There's not really anything else that I feel like I want to say. I feel like I've said too much. I feel like I've overshared. Like, I feel like people can be like, whew. There's clearly been a change in quality, and that's because my camera died on me. So this is the next day. But I wanted to do my 3 gratitudes and 1 hope for the future to end off the episode. I didn't want to end it abruptly. My first gratitude is that I had my nurse's appointment today to do my first lot of jabs, and they went really well. And even though it was uncomfortable, it wasn't unbearable. My second gratitude is for the NHS, because without them I wouldn't be having this medication because of how costly it is, and it really makes me appreciate how lucky I am to have such a good quality level of care for my illness. My third gratitude is that my mum brought me some sunflowers yesterday, and they're starting to open up, and I'm grateful that she bought me them because she knew that today was going to be challenging for me, and she knew that that would make me smile a little bit. So yeah, those are my 3 gratitudes. If you're still listening, then please feel free to comment your gratitudes, or even just silently even if it's just one thing, just say you're grateful for something in your own head. And I have a hope for the future. My hope for the future, it's not as serious as the last one, because my last one was, I hope that the podcast could get received well, and it did. So that's just amazing. I feel like I must have manifested it slightly. But my hope for the future today is that I'm going to go pottery painting this evening, and I hope that the creativity gods are with me and I end up creating a beautiful piece of art. That is what I hope for anyway. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.